Hello everyone, welcome to Healing 711. My name's Kathy. First I'll introduce myself. I'm just a person who has managed to heal past all of the domestic violence that I experienced in my life. I just kind of want to give people a different perspective from a personal view. I want to go through some of the chapters, some of the less talked about things that happens in domestic violence situations, and also what happens afterwards. And that's where I'm going to start right now, is with the parental alienation. Parental alienation is something that is rarely talked about. You look through all of the information on parental alienation, and it's all very clinical and in books, and the information that you would get from people who write about it and treat people that have gone through it. But as a person that has actually gone through all of the parental alienation, is still going through all of the parental alienation and all the aftermath and disaster that comes afterwards. A lot of times we hear people say, why didn't you just leave? Why did you decide to stay? As you will see in this series, that sometimes leaving is just as hard as staying. The torture doesn't end there, especially if you have children with your abuser, which I do. I have 3. We have 3 daughters in common, and the alienation started from the very beginning. So first I'm going to start off by saying that all of the information here is based on personal experience. I'm not a doctor. I haven't studied. This is all things that I've experienced in this situation. So we'll start with the question, why don't you just leave? It's not that easy. Parental alienation, what does it look like? It starts in the relationship. In the relationship, you're constantly belittled anyway, but then they start engaging the children in belittling you. It'll start with jokes, and then the jokes gradually get meaner, and and everyone still thinks it's all funny, but what he's doing is building a place where respect is optional. So the real alienation started when I left him the first time. The first time, he didn't keep the kids from me, but he would always say things like, I'm the better parent. I know you guys love me more. I wish your mom would just let you be with me more, because you want to be with me more. So it starts with that. And then the kids start asking, oh, can we spend more time with Dad? We want to be with Dad more. And then it turns into, well, we like Dad more. And then it turns into, we don't want to be with you. We want to be with Dad or Mom, whatever the situation is. I'm just going by my personal experience. When it really started was, when it got really bad is when I left him the second time. I separated from him for 10 years, but that's another story. We did get back together for about a year, and when I left him the second time, there was going to be hell to pay this time. It started with me moving in with him. I was going through a financial situation, and I ended up being homeless. He opened up his home to me and was like, you can come stay here. And of course, I was with my children. I was in a safe environment. Safe. I will use air quotes with safe. I wasn't sleeping in my car or the streets, let's put it that way. And gosh, it just progressed. I started staying there. First, it started with me showering there, and then it started with me spending the night. Then eventually, all those feelings, the good feelings came back, and, of course, the bad feelings were pushed off to the side and forgotten, which was, huge, huge mistake. And, we all make them, but we learn. So, needless to say, the abuse started right where it left off, because even after 10 years, this man just refused to change. He refused. Now, he had, what do I want to say? He kind of had the upper hand now because I was dependent on him. So he would say things to the kids like, you guys are more responsible than your mother. Your mother is like one of the kids here. I was expected to buy food, cook, clean, participate in paying bills and taking care of the kids, but I was still considered one of the kids. Now he was portraying me as one of his children that he had to take care of. He was handed this role. I handed it to him. So, of course, things didn't work out. It just got to the point where I had already been through this. I had already gotten away from it. And I knew that I couldn't put up with it. It became physical almost immediately. The verbal and emotional abuse, that's never ended. Even throughout the years, that never stopped. But then there was an incident where he was yelling at me, and of course I wasn't listening. I was just trying to stay quiet, keep my head down while I was brewing a pot of coffee, and my coffee pot had those, the little container that you could pull out. But because I wouldn't pay attention to him, he smacked the coffee machine, and all of the water that was brewing the coffee poured all over my arm and burned me. He said, quit being so dramatic. Then he hit it again and it burned me on my side. So at this point I was just done, because I knew it wasn't going to get better. It never was. So I ended up sleeping in my car for 3 months. And then income taxes came. I got my own apartment. And so, the kids, I was already seeing the kids. I was, renting hotel rooms so that way I could spend with them during my my visits. I always made it work somehow. I was homeless, but I was working. And then he, once I got my apartment, apparently this pissed him off because he wanted control. He wanted me to be dependent so he can continue to control me. So, in an attempt to control me, he began withholding visitation with the kids. He would say things like, they don't want to come over there. They don't want to see you. They want to be with me. So, we were supposed to, trade off every week. There would be a week with me, a week off. And then all of a sudden, there were no more visits. The kids were saying, oh, we don't want to be with you. We don't want to go over there. All of a sudden, now that I left him and now that I was doing better and I was lifting myself out of that, predicament, all of a sudden the kids don't want to see me or be with me or spend time with me at all. Needless to say, it did send me into a really, really deep depression, to the point where I was suicidal, because it had been like 2.5 months. And unfortunately, I did say something out loud to the girls, and he used it immediately. I did say something about wanting to take my own life, which, that's one of the regrets that I'm still working through, because I know it was painful. for my kids. Okay. Let's get out of the emotions. But it continued. He went to CPS, and had the kids examined and told them that I was abusive, because I had expressed suicidal ideation. So he used that against me. Eventually, I did end up moving to Tucson. I just couldn't function. I was just not well. I moved to Tucson with my mom. And that's where I'm from. And at that point, he began telling the kids that I didn't love them, that I left them, that I was selfish and I didn't care about them. And this just, the kids were older and, they were connecting what they were seeing with what they were hearing. And I didn't make it any easier on myself by actually leaving. But I knew that I was falling apart and that suicide was just right there. It was right there. For the simple fact that I'd never been separated from my children. Even through all the trials and everything, I'd never spent more than a week away from my kids, maybe 2 weeks if they were on vacation. But, I was spiraling out of control quick. And, these are just some of the things that happen when you leave a relationship, I've had to get a restraining order from him harassing me. He would send me 70, 80 texts in a day, in a night. Within several hours, And I did get a restraining order for that. And, it's just like he did pop up at my house a couple times and made a scene in front of my neighbors. And, it's just like, when you want someone to answer that question, why don't you leave? Because it's not that much easier. And I'm so tired of people thinking, simplifying it as if it's just like, oh, you just pack up and leave. You have children in common. You have a life that you've built together. You have emotional ties that are just so deep, and though they're dipped in so much pain, it's still deep. And and it just irritates my heart and my soul when I hear people say, well, she should have just left. Maybe that's what she wanted because she stayed. And it infuriates me that people will not take a deeper look. They don't talk to people. They just say, oh, he punched her and punched holes in the walls and broke stuff. You don't know what happens in a domestic relationship unless you've been in there. Abusive. There are so many mind games. There's so many emotional games. Narcissists and abusers, they don't look for strong people. They look for people who are broken. And with me, unfortunately, I've had a lifelong history of being around narcissistic people. Always, I was the black sheep. I'm a daughter of a pastor, and I'm not religious, so of course I'm enemy. I'm dang near Satan in their world. But narcissists and abusers seek people who are broken and alone and who are left out in the cold by family, people who don't have a great support system because they know they can make them weaker, faster. And it's a game. It's a game. These people don't walk in not knowing what they're doing. They love power, they love control, and they will do anything to have it, anything to win. It is about winning, being on top, being number one, being the most admired. It's a sickness. And and they start involving the children, and it's just disgusting because what I'm dealing with now is, my daughters are teenagers, and now that they've had all of this garbage repeated and regurgitate it over and over again. They believe that I'm the enemy. They feel that I don't love them, that I left them because I didn't love them, which is not true. I had to heal myself. I had to move into a space where I could at least begin healing. It didn't happen at my mom's, of course. That was just a pit stop, because that whole situation is where all the abuse started. So for that is the source where I learned how to be abused. That's where I learned how to be mistreated. So, be aware that if you are a sensitive person, these people will come in. They will act like your best friend. They will comfort you, console you, make you feel like you are so loved, until they have so much power and control over you, and then the ugliness, it just explodes. It doesn't happen overnight. It's little things here, little things there. So let me explain that to you. It's not stupid people who get into domestic relationships. It is people who have been left behind by their families, people who have suffered trauma, people who are weak and broken, dependent. These are who abusers go after. So if you are a family member of someone who is being abused, step up. Be a good family member. Show some compassion. Show some empathy. Because where I'm at right now, I have no one in my life, but I have voluntarily cut everybody out, because this abuser was able to turn my father, my sisters, everyone in my family against me, just by sharing personal stories that I shared with him, because they're so judgmental, because they're so wrapped up in their religion. They're so judgmental. They're always telling me this is what they basically say this is what I deserve, because I will not accept the Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior. I'll go into more details about the abuse, but my father, as a pastor, should be ashamed of himself for a lot of things that he did. I'm learning to forgive, but I don't yet. But we'll get into that later. But I just want to kind of touch on some subjects that are less talked about with domestic violence, and how they kind of all progress. This is just the part one. It's kind of an introduction. But I will go into more detail with where we're at in the parental alienation, the consequences that I'm suffering right now from the parental alienation and the domestic violence after I left. So I guess we'll continue next time. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I appreciate your ear, and I hope that someone can learn something from this, or at least begin to talk about it. Parental alienation is domestic violence, and we need to get that written into law, because parental alienation is abuse. It's abuse of the children, and it's abuse of the other person, even after they've left the situation. It's sick, and it's painful, and it causes a lot of family heartache that just doesn't need to be there. So thank you, and I will see you on the next one.